Hey, good morning, everyone. This is Robert Phoenix, and I am back again, broadcasting live from the Hill Country. What's happening? Good morning from Indianapolis. Lori says they've extended our statewide mask mandate for another 30 days. Hey, how about that? Ain't that a blast? Hey, Boss Skaggs, good morning. I love Boss Skaggs. Here's a little Boss Skaggs trivia. Do you know that Boss Skaggs was approached by the producers of Saturday Night Fever to have one of his songs? I think it might have been, what is it, Lowdown? One of Boss Skaggs' disco era greatest hits. They approached him to have his song in the movie. And in fact, I think they actually shot some of the dance scenes with, it was either Lido or it was it was one of those tracks from Silk Degrees. They actually shot the scene based on a track, and Boss Skaggs turned them down. He didn't want a song in the movie. So then they reached out to Barry Gibb, Robin Gibb of the Bee Gees, Robin Gibb of the Bee Gees and the Bee Gees. And what did he say? He said, "Yeah, we're in." And then what happened? Saturday Night Fever became one of the largest selling albums of the 1970s. I'm not sure Boss Skaggs has a lot of regret around that. He's had a pretty successful life and career. It's not like not having his track in that movie really changed the arc of his career very much. Let's see. Who do we got? Shirley Schiavo, Rita Perea. What's going on, Rita? Michael Charlie, Emerald V. What's going on? All the way from Bonn. That sounds like a track, doesn't it? All the way from Bonn. There was a track by Mott the Hoople called "All the Way to Memphis," and I was kind of a big Mott the Hoople fan when I was a kid. I loved Mott the Hoople. Very underrated group, by the way. Comes out of the music hall tradition, as it were, in England. A little bit of music hall, a little bit of skiffle. And Mott the Hoople was actually a much more influential band, probably outside of its actual influence as a band itself. And I'll give you two reasons why. Number one, the guitarist for Mott the Hoople, Mick Ralphs, went on to join another group called Bad Company. And of course, Bad Company became a massive, absolutely massive band in the 1970s. And, Bad Company was signed to Swan Song, which was Led Zeppelin's label. Pretty good signing there, Led Zeppelin, on the Bad Company tip. And the other thing that the other influence that Mott the Hoople had was one of the young groupies or people that followed Mott the Hoople around was a guy by the name of Mick Jones, who would wind up becoming the rhythm guitar player, and co-songwriter for The Clash. So Mick Jones was a big Mott the Hoople guy. So who knows if Mott the Hoople's not around? Is there a Mick Jones? Is there a Clash? Is there a Bad Company? And does any of this mean anything now as we sit here in the early degrees of Virgo, the last days of August 2020, ? And those are some of the questions that I'll be addressing today on this version of 15 Minutes of Flame. So without further ado, let's just get this going here. Oh, here we go. Dear blessed and holy Father, Mother God of the great central sun, within the universal light, which is the light of Yeshua, Sananda, Emmanuel, we ask that only the highest and best information and truth come through at this time, through this channel, both literally and figuratively at this time. We humbly accept and embrace the qualities of grace, compassion, empathy, courage, wisdom, discernment, intelligence, higher mind, fortitude, commitment, flexibility, humor, and above all, love. We ask that any karmic residue be cleansed, purified, clarified, and removed from the stream so that we may re-enter our lives as we were once we entered sovereign. So be it. All right, we got a lot to talk about today. A lot to talk about, a lot to discuss. So, what are we going to talk about? Well, before we do that, let me just adjust the camera there a little bit. There we go. And let's get a little of that arbor energy. Let's bring that in right there. The tree of knowledge right here in the old backyard. So, you saw the title of today's show. We now know who the young man is who wound up killing 2 people, wounding a third in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And this is called the Kenosha paradox. And I'm going to get into this today. And there's a few other bits and pieces that I'm going to bring up along the way to try to wrap our heads around where we are and have we've reached kind of this crossroads, this point of critical mass, as it were, as it relates to the ongoing efforts to dismantle and derail Western society and this culture, which some people believe is essential. And I do believe the deconstruction process on some level is inevitable. It's inevitable. Whether or not it's Trump with his Sun Uranus conjunction in Gemini being the Lord of Chaos, or whether it's the dynamics that are being played out and really kind of fit into that Albert Pike scenario where they unleash the nihilists. And then, of course, there is blood on the streets of America, and we have a violent revolution, or we have a violent civil war. And then out of the ashes of that series of violent encounters, that something new, some new society or some new culture sprouts out of the blood-fertilized killing fields that this could potentially erupt into. Could we have a bloodless transformation? Could we have our vibration exist at a level that's so high that we are almost impervious to everything going on here at this time, that we're literally vibrating in another reality? That's a real question, and one that I believe needs to be addressed, and something that people should think about and begin to embrace. But on the other hand, not everybody has that reality, nor not everybody has that intention. Not everybody even has, in some ways, the vibrational makeup or fortitude to be able to hold that. And even myself, I sometimes, I struggle with having and keeping that real high perspective, with understanding what's happening on the streets of America and what this country is becoming. It's a real fine line. It's a real delicate balance. And what the Kyle Rittenhouse event in Kenosha proves to us is that that's exactly what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a deadly, powerful paradox, and one that we have to address and bring to light. And in all of its complexity, in all of its facets, in all of its fractal representation. And I'm going to try to do some of that today as much as I can within a relatively brief period of time, so I don't take up all your time, nor do I take up all mine in a time where we're all busy and I'm working on various projects. So I'm going to try to get into as much of this as possible, from as high a level as possible, and bring it right down to the streets. Before I do that, though, I do want to share something with you guys that there was an event that I participated in yesterday. Well, I actually more than participated in the event. I actually directed the event. I brought it together. All right. And I did this because I do my best to practice what I preach. So if I tell you guys to do something, whatever that something is, within reasonable bounds, within the skill set and within the frame set of what's allowed in some ways, right? So if I'm telling you to do that, then I need to be able to do that. I mean, this is besides what I do every day here, which is, I think, a fairly decent representation of doing something. So here's what happened. I thought to myself, when I go to HEB and I'm the only guy without a mask, I'm one of just many people in that store. I'm an outlier. And what kind of real impact does that make? Maybe it makes a little bit of an impact. But I thought to myself, well, what happened if there were 10, 11, 12 outliers that were part of that experience? What kind of an impact would that make? So I decided to road test this thing. And we managed to get together, I think, 7 people. And what we did is we entered into HEB one by one. And the idea was to be anonymous, but together, and to be in a area of the store where we could clearly be seen. Now, I think we were about maybe 5 people short of having kind of what I would call a critical mass. I think 12 people would be a critical mass. We got 7, but here's what was really interesting. So when I went into HEB, as I was walking in, there was a guy who was walking in, and he didn't have a mask on. And I don't know, we started to talk, and he said to me, he says, it's really refreshing to see somebody's lips when they're talking to me. And then I told him, well, I'm not the only one that's going to be showing up here whose lips you can read. And so we chatted a little bit, and he laughed. And there were a few other people in the store yesterday who were walking around without the old maskaroo. So, the Lord, as they say, works in mysterious ways. So our numbers might have been maybe not as, large as I wanted them to be as we walked into that place. But guess what? Divine Casting Central sent in a few extras. And so they were joining us, even though they didn't know they were joining us. See, this is how this works. I wanted 12. We got 7. Guess what? There were at least 4 or 5 other people in the store now they weren't really part of our group, but they were there, and they were comprising these numbers of people that were surreptitiously showing that you don't have to do what they tell you to do. So this was kind of a level of what I would call subconscious psychological subversion, and I think it was pretty effective in its own right. So there are things you can do, right? So we got together and we all kind of moved around together, pretty much. Although there was one person who was sort of off doing their own thing, but that's okay. We all sort of came together at the end, and we all checked out together, and that was a good thing. And there was this one gal who's terrific. She's just such a trooper. I love this woman. And she was in line, and then there were 2 other people who were part of our group who were in the same line. And that was intentional, by the way, to have at least 3 people in one line who were not wearing the face diaper. That was intentional. So she wound up having a talk with another woman in line with a mask on. And this is why I love this woman. She said, I don't use the self-checkout because, number one, it's alienating. Number 2, it takes jobs away, which I totally agree. She says, even if I have 1 item or 2 items, I go into the line where they have to use a checker. And I've always stressed that. That has been my philosophy around self-checkout from really day one. And the only time I have had to use self-checkout is when the lines are just interminably long and there's no other option and I have to get somewhere. I think I've done it maybe 2 or 3 times. And I think one of them was at Walmart a while ago. So she had this conversation with this woman, okay? And the woman in the mask winds up agreeing with her. She says, you know, you're right. You're right. I hadn't really thought about it in those terms. And guess what? Now she's having this conversation with a woman without a mask. So what does that do? Well, it's an anchor. That was an anchor. Because number one, she had something that the woman in the line agreed with. And number two, she's agreeing with somebody without a mask. So there's things you can do. I'm just telling you right now, there's things you can do. So again, I'm doing my best to practice what I preach and to work out this Gemini equation. It was a very Gemini thing to do. You know, we're not going to go out and we're not going to do the Sagittarian thing and hit you over the head with you know, the laws and you know, our indignation and you know, our so-called inalienable rights. No, you infiltrate and you kind of hack the system. So there you go. There's an idea for you. And listen, I've been planning this for a while, but I didn't want to share it until we actually pulled it off. And guess what? It's going to happen again. I'm not going to say when, and I'm not going to say where, but we all had a great experience. And the people who were there, for them, it was quite empowering. I'm just going to tell you that right now. It was very empowering for them. It was like, wow, you know, we got to, you could tell that I could tell that they had a certain kind of vibration when they went in. When I met them, a lot of these people I'd only met for the first time. Okay. I knew 2 of the people that were part of our group. The rest I didn't know. So, you know, they didn't know me, so they're kind of looking at me like, well, what are we doing? How are we going to do this? And so I gave them the model, and I could tell that their energy was good for the most part, right? A little like, well, who is this guy, and what is he going to get us to try to do? And if I was them, I'd have the same kind of, you know, vibe. It's like, well, who is he? I'd want to know. Well, who is this guy? Do I trust this guy? Is he going to, you know, lead us down, you know, the Murrah building path? Is this guy the Timothy McVeigh of maskdom? You know, I think these are important questions to ask, right? I would. And so, you know, I did my best to kind of reassure everything was going to be cool and very, you know, no confrontations. And when they came out, they had a different energy. They had a different vibe. And nobody in our group was above, I'd say, nobody in our group was below, say, 55. So wrap your head around that. These are the activists now. These are the people that are potentially doing things that are throwing a monkey wrench into the system. And again, the feedback and the energy was very, very positive, very positive. And one of the people wanted to tell other people about what we did on Facebook, and I said, well, why don't you just suggest the idea? You know, there's a very specific group here in Texas, and I said, just suggest the idea. You know, because I do think that on some level there's power in secrecy. And I'm not saying this to support these groups or organizations that live and operate behind a veil. But there's a reason why they live and operate behind a veil. There's power there. There's power there. You know, what do they call the spy game? They call it cloak and dagger. Because they're cloaked. They're obscured. And the dagger piece is what they use to defend or offend the groups or people that they're engaged with. So while I'm for a lot of transparency, authenticity, being open, remember we are in Gemini time, and that's not what that's about. This is not what it's about. It's about, playing the trickster, but playing the trickster in a kind of a divine and sacred way. We're in a cosmic game, and right now Gemini as the trickster is that energy is there. It's available. And if you work with it with the intention, that Sagittarian intention, right? Because this is how the nodes work. The Sagittarian intention is to bring some kind of macro solution, right, to the micro execution, which is Gemini. That's how it works. But the way the nodes are set up now is that you don't go into the South Node in Sagittarius, because that's not how it operates. You go in there and you go to have sort of the big, it's not the big picture, but the big action. This is how things are done. The commandment, right? The great commandment. And you're going to be going in the wrong direction, because number one, people are so polarized. If you come in from that Sagittarian angle, you're going to create more polarization. Look, and I do it from time to time as well. Okay, but if I do it, number one, it's intentional, or number two, I'm working on some older programming that I'm trying to straighten out or trying to adapt to the time that we're in. And this brings us to one of the other headlines into today's program, which is the Kenosha paradox. And I'm going to get into that. And that's where we are. We're in a paradoxical time where Kyle Rittenhouse, now he's the 17-year-old who has now been charged with 2 counts of murder because he was in the streets of Kenosha with an AR-15, 17 years old. Apparently, you cannot possess a firearm in Wisconsin if you are under the age of 18. Apparently, he lives in Illinois, so he's not from Wisconsin. And there are a lot of people who are saying, well, he went there looking for a fight. He went there looking for trouble. He's not that far. Apparently, his family is not that far from Kenosha. He lives in Illinois. But now I have to double check this, but I've heard that his family actually has a business in Kenosha. Okay. So does that mean that it gives him the right or the credence to go into Kenosha with an AR-15 and theoretically defend his family's business, if this is true? Because the case that I'm hearing is that he had no business being there. No business at all. Now, if he's at home and he's protecting his home, then that's another thing. That gets us back into the people, from Missouri, like the McCloskeys, who were theoretically in their home, although they decided to make a significant display of their ability to protect themselves, which of course the left is using. The left is going to use this Kyle Rittenhouse event. It's going to happen. It's already happening. Nancy Pelosi is saying, "Oh, this is Trump's America," vigilantes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And in a lot of ways, this is the best thing that happened to the Democrats and Biden, because they've been taking a ton of heat. And even Don Lemon has basically said, look, the rioting has to stop, or the protests have to stop, because Biden's taking a beating. He's going down in the polls. Well, now we have something that, it's a big, fat, juicy Luschburger that the left can just shove in their face and feed on. And go, see. This is, if you elect Trump, this is what you're going to get. And this is the paradox now. This show is about paradox, which is very much a Gemini concept, and a Gemini theme. So let's go back to the events that started this whole Kenosha deal. And remember, on Sunday night, on my Sunday night show, I said, get ready, because the next thing is going to happen. I was basically, and I didn't know it was already happening, because the the Jacob Blake thing happened just a few hours before my show, but I didn't know about it. But if you look at pattern recognition, it's easy. It's easy to figure out how this stuff works. And especially when you look at the sort of the momentum that people are starting to get now with the whole mask thing. Now, the mask thing and the riots are connected. They're connected. It's a pincer effect. We have the mask thing over here, and then we have the BLM, Antifa protest, theoretical protest over here. So it's a pincer effect. They're working in tandem with one another, right? So when people get tired of the mask thing, then what do? They turn up the volume over here with the BLM thing and the riots. And so then what happens? Well, people have to kind of, backtrack and try to figure out what's going on there. And then eventually, the fires will burn out with these events. But I don't think this Kyle Rittenhouse thing is going to burn out. I think these are like the bullets fired at Valley Forge in some ways. And I'm going to take both positions here with the Kyle Rittenhouse event. I'm going to show you how paradox works and why it is essential to be able to resolve the paradox, right? You've got to resolve the paradox. Now, you can resolve the paradox by not getting involved. That's an option. Turn off the TV, turn off my YouTube channel, and go sit under a tree, or read the Bible or whatever works for you. Bust out some roomie, and then you step outside the paradox. That's what? That's an option. It's an option. And if that's what your theoretical high self is telling you to do, then hey, follow that path. I'm not here to dissuade you. I am not here to dissuade you. But the paradox is that if we don't do anything, then guess what's going to happen? Then more of this is going to be perpetrated. And the crisis will be perpetuated, and it will get even worse. Now, I know a lot of people are saying, well, if they come to my house, I'm going to defend myself. I'm not going to put myself in harm's way. I'm not going to go out into a riot like that or a protest like that. And that's smart. That's really smart. But most people who take that position, number one, they either live in a suburb or they live in a rural area. And let's just say that by the time they get to your house, your property, your town, your county, your rural area, whatever those things are, your little suburb, by the time they get there, it might be too late. Because what we're dealing with is an infestation of locusts that are just ripping through everything. So that's a position you can take. It's a position you can take. And maybe that's the best position you can take. But at the same time, what's going on? What's going on is we're seeing the demoralization of the quote unquote American people, right? The demoralization. Because it is really demoralizing on some level. Like when I watched that woman from Kenosha talk about her place being burned to the ground and her just being devastated, cratered. If you didn't have some kind of perspective, if you couldn't resolve the paradox inside of yourself, that'd be really demoralizing. So this is a big problem. This is a major, major issue, is the demoralization and the theoretical impotence of the public, the silent majority, to be able to stand up and respond to what's taking place. Now, remember, they chose Kenosha for a reason. And the reason they chose Kenosha for a reason is, number one, it is strategically located between Milwaukee and Chicago. You can get to it real easy. So if they wanted to bus people in, which they did, it wouldn't take that long. Number two, it is not a major city. I believe the population of Kenosha is about 100,000 people. So it's not a small town, but it operates in many ways like a small town. It is not Chicago. It is not Milwaukee. It's not even Madison, which is a course, a liberal burg that is not unlike Ann Arbor, not unlike Berkeley, not unlike Austin, where they have the universities that promote a decidedly liberal, progressive agenda, right? So it's not even that. So from a kind of a vibrational frequency, Kenosha was a perfect fit because of where it was located strategically. It's in an area that is, again, Wisconsin, predominantly Caucasian, but not, but there are parts of Milwaukee that are very, very, very mixed. There are areas of Milwaukee that are decidedly Black and African American. And some of those neighborhoods in Milwaukee have been very active in the so-called civil rights movement for a very long time. So I don't just want to paint a picture of Wisconsin as a bunch of dairy farmers and cheesemakers. That's not really the case. It's a lot more diverse than you think it might be. So it's a strategic location. Of course, the governor, Tony Evers, comes into play. And what does he do? He, of course, he basically does nothing. He sends out a press release and condemns everything and basically says, go on, do what you want to do what you need to do, get it out of your system. That's going to be the justice for this unjust event. And then the whole Jacob Blake thing is just a really bizarre event to begin with. It's a really bizarre event. Are we talking Breonna Taylor? Are we talking George Floyd? Are we talking Ahmaud Arbery? Yeah, we got the lawyer, the same lawyer, Benjamin Crump, who I've connected with all these events, and the speed, the lightning fast speed with how the stormtroopers who come in and loot and burn were deployed was really breathtaking on some level. Like, were they already there? Were they primed and ready to go? Now, we don't know a lot about this Jacob Blake event. He's raised over $800,000 on his GoFundMe, which I'm sure probably about half of that will go to Benjamin Crump to come to his defense. But apparently he didn't have a sanitary record in his past. And look, we've all done shit. None of us are clean in a lot of ways. But it's about timing and it's about context. And there was a domestic dispute. Apparently, this was not the first time that he had gone through something like that. And he resisted arrest. He had a knife. He'd brandished a knife. And apparently none of this has been released on video, by the way. So we're still dealing with kind of secondhand information, which is what I'm sharing with you. So you go out, you do your own research. And then he goes theoretically to get a gun. And that's when the cops supposedly shoot him in the back. But really, is that the case? Do we really know what's really going on with Jacob Blake? And I read an article yesterday, and of course, they're trying to connect him and paint him with his grandfather, who was a pastor at the AME church there in, where's he from? Is he from Evanston? I think he's from Evanston, Illinois. And that his grandfather is connected to like the civil rights movement. It's the same thing that they've done with Kamala Harris and trying to connect her with her grandfather and, him being a major force for helping to deconstruct colonialization. He's a decolonizer in India. And then after he was finished with his great work in India, he went to Africa to continue the work of social justice and rights and decolonization. So there's a link to the past. They're definitely linking him to his past. And apparently he worked at, I guess, his grandfather's recycling center. And there's always this narrative that he was a great guy. Everybody loved him. Thoughtful, kind, sweet, shy. But that doesn't always match up with the actual event or even the record of the event or the record of the person with the event. We haven't seen any video footage, not one piece of video footage. There's been no interview with him. Now, they say he may be paralyzed. We'll see. So, do we? I mean, I guess there's some footage. I guess let me back that up. I think there's some footage, but just like George Floyd, did we see all the footage? No. What we saw is what they released to us. What they saw is what we saw is what they gave us. So immediately, people made very, very fast assumptions based on what they saw, and then as they've released the material retroactively, we can see that theoretically those cops did everything in their power to try to handle the situation. And if it's true that he had a toxicology report where he was completely wasted on fentanyl and completely wasted on methamphetamine, then we got an issue there. There's a big issue because the fentanyl alone would impair his ability to breathe. And of course, there's all the other strange connections with Freemasonry, the Prince Hall Lodge just down the street, his connection with Stephen Jackson, who is theoretically his twin. Now we're into the invocation of Gemini again. Stephen Jackson openly admitting that he has ties and connections to Freemasonry, that George Floyd's, I believe, father, just like Trayvon Martin's father, is also connected to Freemasonry. The thing, now we're down in the rabbit hole. Now we're turning in the rabbit hole. But again, we weren't given all that so-called video information before there was just a massive social judgment, and then this crisis that we're in now was lit. Now, of course, the kerosene was already there. Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor. I've talked about this ad nauseum. The first event obviously was Trayvon Martin, and that was never really resolved. And you look at the name Martin, right? What is Martin? It's Martian. It's Martian. Martian is what? It's Marshall. It's Mars. These things are not by mistake. They're not by accident. There's a reason why his last name is Martin and not Joseph or Daniels or whatever, right? And again, his father, Tracy, he's a Mason. And I've seen the pictures. I've shown the pictures. I'm not sure if they're still on the internet now, but there's a connection there. And then you had the other event, Jonathan Martin, who played for the Miami Dolphins. And this is right after the Trayvon Martin thing happens. You have the two Martins. And Jonathan Martin, his father, and I've said this before, is a law professor at Cal State Northridge. And he's written a number of really expensive and in-depth training manuals for the Department of Homeland Security and FEMA. Okay. And these are books that, if you wanted to buy one, cost about $250. And the press that publishes his books is connected to George Soros through the Tides Foundation. Okay. Okay, I'm back. That was interesting. Quite interesting. No comments around that, but all of a sudden my internet just got blanked out and deleted. So I had to go in and do a hard reset, which seems to have worked for now. But that was quite interesting in the moment. Let's see. Comments. Yep, I'm back. And so we had 180 people and 100, about 120 checked out. And that's all right. It's okay. Maybe they'll come back, but it definitely had an effect of kind of emptying out the stream a little bit. I lose my internet all the time. Now you know. Well, I don't lose my internet all the time. And you live in a country outside of the U.S., which is spotty, and and that is what it is. And the timing is, how shall we say, interesting to say the least. And by the way, I am not impersonating a news person. I am an individual here who is putting things together for entertainment purposes only, apparently. But yeah, interesting stuff. Keep your wits about you. That's what I have to say. So this thing goes all the way back to Trayvon Martin, and there was never any resolution around the Trayvon Martin event, which is why this is a continuation of what happened with Trayvon Martin. And I was just trying to point that out. And I was looking at it from an esoteric perspective with the two Martins, the Gemini effect, the connections between, on one side, the father of one Martin and then the father of the other Martin. That's it. That's all I was trying to do. That's all I was trying to do. There you go. You have the right to press according to the First Amendment. Damn right. But you know what? This is not, YouTube is not like that. YouTube is a platform. It is not a publisher. And so YouTube and all of the internet entities are accorded certain rights and dispensations. They're able to essentially avoid the whole First Amendment issue by being a platform. And if that designation was changed, we wouldn't be having an issue right now. But it's not going to get changed because Google, YouTube, Facebook, well, YouTube is Google, Twitter. I mean, these are companies that line the pockets of the people that make the decisions in Washington, D.C., both on the left and the right. Doesn't matter. There are Republicans that have, Google stock, Facebook stock in their portfolio. They contribute to their campaigns, either directly or indirectly. So do you think that they're going to, bite the hand that feeds them? No, that's not going to happen. That's just not going to happen. And they could if they wanted to. Just change the designation from a platform to a publisher. If they're a publisher now, guess what? They can't do what they do. Plain and simple. I've pointed this out before. All right, so let's get back to the story at hand and try to resolve the paradox here. Let's go back to what happened in Kenosha and how quickly it accelerated and how over the course of really from Monday night to Wednesday night when all this really, or Tuesday night, Sunday night to Tuesday night, 48 hours, and Kenosha became incendiary. And there were no cops there. The cops did not respond. The fire department took at least 3 hours to come and put people's fires out. So when the cops did show up, what did they do? They protected the courthouse. They protected their so-called bastion of law and order because, of course, they were trying to, burn that down, take that down, page right out of the Portland playbook. But they weren't going to stand for that. At the very least, they were, at least putting up some kind of a defense against this. But clearly, as a law enforcement group or brigade, they were vastly outnumbered. Vastly outnumbered. And, when you're dealing with upwards of, 2,000 to 3,000, and I'm guessing about 2,000, I think would probably be about a right number, correct number of people, most of whom are not even from Kenosha. And they're brought into Kenosha. And you're dealing with that kind of mass. It's very hard to like defend oneself against those numbers. But even so, they were not, it's like, okay, we're going to wait till this all, like, will the fire department risk life and limb to go put out a burning business, the fire of a burning business? Or are they going to put themselves in harm's way? That's not what they're there to do. They don't run around wearing flak jackets and, dark goggles that keep their eyes safe from, high-powered laser pointers. That's not what their job is. Their job is to go out and take care of emergencies and put fires out. Although it might be a bit more interesting and strategic if they turn the fire hoses on so-called protesters. That would be quite effective. And they used to do that. They used to have water cannons, and they would go out and they would use sort of the intense pressure to move people around. And as far as a quote-unquote non-lethal weapon goes, it's effective. It's very effective. So Tucker Carlson last night was talking about how the Kyle Rittenhouse event is a result and a byproduct of nobody stepping in to take care of what's happening in the cities across America. And he's right. He's absolutely right. How could you not come to that conclusion that a 17-year-old kid, and this is where it gets murky. Like, why is he there? What's his intentions? Apparently he was trying to help people. There's a lot of video stuff around the Kyle Rittenhouse thing that's going to come out. It's out there. It's on various channels. Some of those channels might be scrubbed, but that video has been captured, I guarantee you. And the guy that's defending Kyle Rittenhouse is Lynn Wood. And Lynn Wood defended the guy from the bombing in Georgia at the Olympic Village, Atlanta, Georgia Olympic Village. He also defended the young guy from Washington, D.C. and successfully defended him. Lynn Wood's got a pretty amazing track record. Richard Jewell's the guy from Georgia, and it's Nick, what's his name, from Washington, D.C., in which he got a judgment for, by the way, for him from the Washington Post. So, and I guess he's going to be speaking at the RNC if he hasn't done it already. I think it's maybe tonight. Anyway, the reason why this thing with Kyle Rittenhouse happened, and it is not a bridge too far, it's because nobody has stepped in. Nobody has stepped in and done anything. And so now you got a 17-year-old kid who is essentially, maybe playing this role of trying to defend his family's business. If that's true, if that's the case. And then now what do we have? We've got people that are dead and one severely injured. Well, who are these people? Has anybody really taken a good look at the people that were affected and impacted by this so-called act of vigilantism? Well, I'm going to show you who they are. Okay, this is part of the paradox now. And we have to be able to resolve this paradox in some way. And that's really what this show is about, is trying to figure out how to resolve the paradox. All right, so let's go. I'm going to give you, let's see, now I got to, all right, here it is. This is going to open your eyes, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to open your eyes. So check this out. Now, I'm not here to endorse this thread on Twitter. Okay? I'm not endorsing the person. I'm not endorsing the thread. But the thread has information that I think needs to be shared. So this is the guy that got his head blown off, essentially. Joseph D. Rosenbaum, registered sex offender. This guy's a pedophile. Do with it what you will. Do with it what you will. Now, does that mean that, well, he deserved to be taken out because he's a pedophile? You know, I'm not chiming in on divine judgment. I'm not. Judge not, lest ye shall be judged. I'm just telling you there's a connection. There's an interesting connection with this guy's past. He's got a pretty significant criminal record. All right? Pretty significant criminal record. He's 36 years old. So offense statute is sexual conduct with a minor. And that's not the only thing that Joseph Rosenbaum is involved with. Okay? That's not the only thing. Remember, this is not a thread or a person I follow on Twitter. I'm not endorsing the person. I'm not endorsing the thread. I'm just giving you what's come up through this information. Okay. So he winds up doing time in prison in Arizona. And look at this. This is what happens when he's in prison. He's got a ton of issues in prison. And who knows? Maybe I'd have a ton of issues. I don't know. Well, I'm just telling you that he was not a model citizen. Let's put it that way. Okay? Not a model citizen. So this guy was running around basically telling people that he was going to, quote unquote, do violent things, right? Do violent things. Now, here's the other guy right here. Again, now I'm just showing you the feed. And here's this is a guy that was shot in the arm. His name is Gage Paul Grosskreutz. There he is. I think I have another image of him, but if you blow the image up, which I think I can do, let's do that. You'll be able to see some things here with this fellow. He's a felon, has possession of a firearm. So he has a firearm. He's a felon. He's not supposed to have a firearm. See that? That's him. He's got the handgun. And this is the handgun that theoretically he was going to use on Kyle Rittenhouse. That looks like, what is that? Wasp spray or something like that. So these people are there with the intent to harm. They are not there to protest police brutality. That is not why they're there. And supposedly this guy is, this is very interesting here. When you get to see his face, right? So this is from Andy No. And Masaki sent this to me last night, that if you look at his bandana, he's got Baphomet all around his bandana right here. These are all images of Baphomet right there. Okay? Right around the throat. Right in the throat chakra. And this is what it looks like to have your bicep blown off. Again, I'm just showing you. So this is the background on him. The third who was shot and survived is Gage Grosskreutz, 26. He's a member of the People's Revolutionary Movement. He was filmed chasing after the teen with a pistol. He was shot at close range in the upper arm. He has a criminal record that includes being intoxicated and armed with a gun. That's a mugshot of the guy. And this is him now dealing with the reality of not having a bicep. Okay. Again, I'm not endorsing this Twitter thread. I'm not endorsing this person. I'm just giving you info on the whole situation, who these people are. The second guy, the guy who got shot in the stomach, also has a criminal record. So this is he was a burglar who possessed an illegal firearm. So these people, they're not acolytes of Martin Luther King. These are not the spiritual descendants of Mahatma Gandhi. These are very dangerous people. They're incredibly dangerous people. And they were in a volatile and flammable situation. Okay. And you think that they're outliers? You think that they're the only people at these events with these kinds of backgrounds and this type of violent history? The answer to that is no. Absolutely not. Are these people recruited because they do have a violent tendency and a violent past? Quite possibly. And the question is, why is this happening? Why are they allowing people who have a very clear background and a checkered past to continue to be engaged in these kinds of protests, right? So now we get to the cynical part. This is the cynical piece. And this is the part of the paradox that is, again, something that needs to be resolved. And I've talked about this before. So the cynical piece is that they're letting this happen. When I say they, I'm generally referring to the GOP on this front. And you know what? I'm going to come out with both barrels here and say that this is something that the Trump administration has responsibility and accountability for. Now, you'll say it's about the states. Oh, it's the states' rights. Now, when Trump went into the coronavirus protocols, that there is this kind of underlying thread that when he did that, he ceded the country at that point to FEMA. And that, again, the rumor is that Trump can't do anything. He's really not even president right now. And I've talked about this. You can go down that rabbit hole if you choose to and wish to. That's that's out there. So if that's the case, then what can the federal government do anyway at this point? What can Trump, as who theoretically has executive powers, do if he's not even in charge of the so-called government? And even if that's not the case, even if Trump still is POTUS, even if he still has executive powers, the precedent through the coronavirus has been set that it's the states who determine their own direction when it comes to the coronavirus. The states now have the right to observe and enact their own protocols. So if that's the case, and the states have the rights to do so, then the states have the rights, theoretically, to deny any kind of federal intervention or any kind of action, overt or covert, by POTUS and the federal branch. You see how that works? They were given essentially states' rights to do one thing. And you think that that's really an accident? You think that that's just kind of how these things work? No, these things they work in tandem. They work in tandem. And I've been pointing this out. On the one side, you have what's happening with the coronavirus protocols, and the other side, you have what's happening with the so-called protests. And it's a pincer effect. That's what's happening. So now you got a 17-year-old kid who goes out, and what does he do? Well, based on the criminal records of these individuals, he more than likely was engaged in keeping them from doing something moving forward. Now, do I endorse that? Do I endorse it? I don't endorse violence. But you also have to understand that we live in a multidimensional universe, that we live with divine judgment. These are the things that happen. A lot of times, if it's your day and your number's being called, your number's being called. And if you're on the right side of things, we know what the right side of things. The right side of things is how you treat other people. If you have love in your heart, if you have real compassion and real empathy, you'll be able to kind of move around some of this stuff, right? Because what you're doing is you're actually bringing more empathy, more compassion, more love, higher wisdom, higher knowledge to your life, situations, and people around you. Okay? That's how it works. That's how it works. On the other hand, there is a whole other part of this kind of divine order that we are not in control of. So, what happened in Kenosha, a few nights ago, like that event, and I've been trying to kind of share this with people, like that event was already on some level predetermined by the choices each of those four people made in their lives that brought them there to that moment. Okay. That event was already predetermined on some level. It was just a matter of how it was going to play out. That's it. And then we don't know what the individual theoretical karma is between those three guys and the young man that was involved in that situation. We don't know. We don't know. And when I say karma, I'm talking about contracts. So, and again, this is the paradox. We're trying to understand this and make judgments around this situation from a system and a perspective that is supposed to be taking place within the so-called legal limits, which, by the way, aren't even being recognized nor addressed. So there's a whole other level of judgment and a whole other level of order, right, that is going on, and that we can't always begin to interpret. That's another part of the paradox. We're limited. We're limited in our perspective. As much as we'd like to be expansive, we're limited in our perspective. And that's a truth, right? Here's another part of the paradox. Again, if this continues to happen, then what's going to happen? Then eventually the locusts will move to the rural areas. And by the time that happens, people will be on their heels. And you don't think that by the time that happens, that these people will be fortified? You don't think that'll happen? Of course it will. Because if you've been watching this from really the beginning, and let's say the beginning is 2016, which is when Antifa really came out in places like Berkeley. And I remember, 2016, Trump was in San Mateo, California, and they were going batshit crazy in San Mateo, California. Burlingame, that's where he was. He's at the Burlingame Hyde House, I think, the Hyde Inn in Burlingame, and he was having a speech there, and they were going batshit crazy. If you watch the video from San Jose, they're running around, chasing people down, tackling people. So this thing has been going on since 2016, easily. And it hasn't abated. So what we've seen now, where those were sort of the kind of the early stirrings of this stuff, and then we saw, the free speech battles on campuses like Berkeley and downtown Berkeley, where there were fights, and Antifa was essentially showing up with, bike locks and a few things, but they were clearly overmatched in certain instances. Clearly overmatched. Now let's fast forward. Let's get into Portland. And what do we see? Well, we see them start at a certain level. And as that situation is degraded, we can see that they have worked out a lot of different tactics, right? So they're not just like this one kind of hive mind that just shows up and doesn't react, or I don't want to use the word evolve. That would be too generous. Adapt. They do. Absolutely they do. And it's not some kind of morphogenetic field adaptation. No, they're adapting because they're getting like instruction. They're getting intel. They're adapting through essentially what is a command control. That's what's happening. So you don't think that if this continues, that they will not get to a place where by the time they theoretically get to the suburbs or the rural areas, that they won't have a new level of adaptation, and that your idea of protecting and defending your property based on where we are now or where we've been or where this is headed, that is going to be a reasonable and effective model? It's a question. I'm just bringing it up. Because if this is true and this level of adaptation and mutation is taking place, which it is, by the time they get to your front door, they will not be the same people, or they will not be the same entity. Let's call them an egregore entity that began randomly showing up at Trump speeches in 2016. It'll be a very, very different entity with very different players that'll be involved in that dark cast. So, for people who say that, well, you defend your castle rights, that's all true. And I firmly believe that. You protect your family, you protect your property, even though theoretically it might be called systemically racist on some level, right? Which is actually out there. But what about the rest of this thing? What about this idea of, a country, the United States of America? Like, who's protecting that? Nobody. And again, the most cynical observation is that this is happening for a reason, that it's being promoted so that at the end of the day, the poll numbers will go up for Donald Trump. And now the Democrats have been lamenting over the fact that Trump's numbers are going up, and Don Lemon is basically saying, hey, look, you got to deal with these protests because it's making us look bad. He said that on on his Ebony and Ivory broadcast with Chris Cuomo. But now they got a gift. There's the paradox again. Now they got a gift with Kyle Rittenhouse. There's your gift. Now they could use this as an excuse to warn voters that this is the future of America, that this is what Trump administration will promote, right? And Trump has already distanced himself from the event. He has to. I'm not saying he should come out and put his arms around the kid. If he wants to get elected, he'll do everything in his power publicly to distance himself. And if he really believes in the kid, or he believes that people have a Second Amendment right or First Amendment right, he'll work back channels to help the kid out. We'll see about that. And I'm sure that the left will be very, very happy. They'll be ecstatic if that is the case, because they won't. I'm going to play a little something here. And I'm going to try to, again, sort of tee this thing up so you don't have to. All right, here we go. So, again, I'm going to source Tucker Carlson. And he had an opportunity to talk with Mark Meadows the other night. He's Trump's chief of staff. And I'm going to play you that interview. And again, I'm not a news broadcaster. I'm not impersonating a news broadcaster. But I am going to show you something that was broadcast on Fox News, and I'm going to comment on it. Okay. Here we go.
Over at the White House, we're happy to have him on tonight. Mr. Meadows, thanks so much for coming on. So I have to ask you about the continuing violence in Kenosha. It has reached a point where people are getting hurt, huge amounts of properties being destroyed. I mean, it does seem out of control. Why is this being allowed to continue?
Well, it is out of control, and it can't be allowed to continue, Tucker. You're exactly right. Obviously, I got a call today from the congressman that represents that district, from Senator Johnson as well, really just pleading for help. Said that the local sheriff and mayor and police chief need some additional assistance. So I got on the phone right away and called the governor and offered assistance in the form of additional National Guard help. As you know, they're going to have some additional National Guard there tonight. But you've got to, as a governor and as elected officials, you've got to either ignore the problem, which a lot of liberal governors are doing exactly that. They're ignoring the problem, or you have to deal with it. And consequently, when you deal with it, you have to make sure that you have enough people on the ground to not let the rioting go. You listen, we have a First Amendment right that allows you to peacefully protest, but you do not have a First Amendment right to loot and to riot. And what we're seeing on the streets of Kenosha really just breaks our heart. The president was on the phone with the governor today as well. We have National Guard standing by that if the general for the National Guard needs additional help, we're there to do it. But today, that request was denied by the governor.
I just keep thinking, and clearly Tony Evers wants riots. He's the governor of Wisconsin. He should be ashamed. This is a moral stain, in my opinion. But I keep thinking, if these were right-wing protesters and they were screaming racial epithets and intimidating Democratic voters, the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division would not allow that to stand for 3 months. Do you think they would? Why are they allowing this? I honestly don't understand.
Well, I can tell you that as we've gone in, there are a couple of things that have happened behind the scenes, Tucker. You're right to have called it out, not just here in Kenosha, but in Portland. You've been covering that on a regular basis. No, we've made over 99 actual arrests in Portland. But here's the interesting thing is when you go in and you've got a local DA in Portland, that is, where they won't even arrest people. And if they arrest them, they let them out the next day. It's just a perpetual problem that you have. And that's why when we look at it, we have to do a number of things federally. The president has been very clear with me, very clear with the attorney general. Enough is enough. It's time to make sure that we restore the safety
enough
of
is
those
enough.
Communities.
Enough is enough. It's time.
A task force to make sure that there's some of those federal arrests that I just mentioned. But even in addition to that is making sure that we have additional federal resources. So the appeal tonight to the people of Kenosha is the president is willing to help. It's time that we take control, and hopefully the number of National Guard that they have in tonight will actually restore peace. But I'm not optimistic.
All right, that was on the 25th, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that is when. Let's see, what are we at now? We're at the 27th. That was the night that this whole thing went down. So, for all intents and purposes, the National Guard was ineffective and useless. Now, did you see how Tucker called him out? And he basically said, look, if these people were supposed, right-wingers, or, they were threatening Democratic voters and they were yelling racial epithets, do you think that the Department of Justice would sit back and allow that to happen? That's a big fat fucking no, okay? It's a no. They wouldn't, because number one, they have to protect their turf. They have to protect their tautological turf. What is tautological? Tautology is connected to ideology. It's what they believe in, right? It's what they're able to prove on some level. So they'll protect their turf. They don't want to be associated with that, because that is that's kind of a no-fly zone. And if Trump wants to be reelected, he has to cleanse himself of anything that remotely relates to or connects with any of this stuff that would appear to be law and orderly. He has to at this point. But it's a dangerous game. It's a dangerous game because people are dying, businesses are burning, they're getting shut down, right? These cities are living hell, a living nightmare. So there's got to be other ways of dealing with this. And there are things that I propose, right? Here's what I propose. You get Tony Evers on the line. You have a conversation with him. And the conversation is that unless you allow the National Guard to come in there and do what we need to do and do what they need to do, I'm cutting off all funding to your state. And then immediately pursuant to this conversation, if you look in your inbox, your official state gov inbox, your encrypted inbox, you've been served with a gag order that you cannot talk about this, that nobody in your administration or their relatives can talk about this. And if word gets out, then now you're in violation of a gag order. That's what you do. You just say, I'm taking away all your funding, or at least half your funding, right? And then you play ball. It's easy. It's not that hard. It is not that hard. And what about all these organizations that they're, who are nonprofit organizations, which essentially are grooming and incubating dissidents, from the Sunrise Movement to Incubator to any number of these groups, right? These are the people that are cultivating the next level of dissidents in our country. Well, you take away their nonprofit status. That's what you do. You cut their funding. This is all bloodless. It's all bloodless. It has, and it's very effective, but it hasn't been done. So you wonder why it hasn't been done. Now, apparently, Trump has taken a loan from George Soros in the past. Oh, isn't that interesting? So is Jared Kushner. Jared Kushner has taken Soros money. You think that might have something to do with it? Look, some people will say, well, Robert, you're this or you're that, or, you're a Trump lover. No, I'm just trying to give you information, people. I'm just trying to untangle this thing as to why these things aren't done. Now, Trump has decided that he no longer wants to be affiliated with Sheldon Adelson. He's done his little Sheldon Adelson work. He moved the embassy to Jerusalem, right? So he met his Sheldon Adelson requirements. But maybe there's a reason why some of the things that I'm talking about, cutting the funding, hasn't occurred, because maybe, just maybe, both the President of the United States and Jared Kushner and maybe some other people might have, economic ties to Mr. Soros, who apparently lives in New York State. Like, there's an address for him in New York State. Well, what's that about? Why is this guy even allowed at this point to even live in this country? Could he, and again, I think he's like the Mandarin from the Iron Man movie. I think George Soros I think he's ultimately kind of a grocery clerk. That's what I think he is. He's the bag man for people behind him, whoever those people are. He is the face of the so-called opposition, but that's all he is. He's just a face, but a face nonetheless. Why don't you kick him out of the country? If he's connected to all these events and it's easy to find the money trail, and basically it's treason, it's dissidence. Kick him out. Never let him back in. And then cut off his bank account. So this is an important point now, because what's really at stake here? Is the state being reelected, or is doing something like a freaking lightning bolt, like a thunderbolt, and completely disassembling that avenue and venue of funding more important? Like, if you could, here's another paradox. If you could take out George Soros completely, economically, and never have him influence another group, foundation, organization, or event or person in this country moving forward, but it would cost you your presidency, would it be worth it? That is a really important question to ask, right? That's a sacrifice. And you're sacrificing maybe your legacy, the kids, Steve Pacinics on Alex Jones talking about, how it's going to be just fine, and how Ivanka and Jared are waiting in the wings. Do we really want that? Number one. And number two, is that going to be worth it? What would be more profitable and theoretically truthful in the short term? If they could take Soros and those avenues completely out of the equation and let's say Joe Biden is elected, then where are they going to get the money to run their programs? Like, you are essentially neutering them on some level. Now, would there be somebody else? Would there be another Soros in the wing, like the Koch brothers or somebody like that? Well, maybe. And then target them too. Don't make it just like, oh, we're going to take out these lefties. Whoever they could tap into, do the same thing to them. That would be a great legacy. That would be a great legacy. And that would be sacrificial on some level. So that's the question. Would you want to do that and make like a swift and lasting cut to the Gordian knot? Or do you want to have the country bleed out so that there could be another 4 years, with the hopes that in the next 4 years that there will be resolution around this stuff? I know what I would do. I know what I would take. I would take the Gordian knot. I would take the Gordian knot. I would take the cauterized moment and you just burn it out. And whatever happens, happens. If your family's legacy or your family's fortune is hit, that's the way it is. That is the way it is. Now, maybe there's a long-term plan and you just keep going and going and going so that you can turn this battleship around. Okay? That's what the Russians are doing, by the way. The Russians have a long-term plan. The Russians are not playing a short game. Not at all. The Russians are playing this thing out, right? They're looking 30 years down the line. They're the guys that created Yuri Bezmenov. They created the system. They understand not only demoralization, but remoralization. And that's what the Russians are doing. They're in the process of remoralization. And that's why they brought in the Orthodox Church as a organizing principle, a spiritually organizing principle to remoralize the people. Oh, look at what's going on in America. Ha ha ha. Isn't that interesting? Just stick with us. Just stick with me. We got the program. We got the script. I don't have a problem with that. They're taking the long view. They're playing the long game. When Russia came back and basically reformed after the fall of the wall, guess what they became? They became a Capricorn country. So now you're dealing with the Capricorn script, the Capricorn theme. So they're playing a long game. And right now we're just playing such a interminably short game. We're just trying to fucking get to November, okay? That's the game we're playing. With some idea that we're going to make America great again. That's where we are. And that's really kind of sad that we're really just trying to get through to November. And there is no guarantee in November that this thing is going to get resolved. The magic moment where Trump gets reelected, and now we got 4 more years, and he can really now act on his promises because he's not been able to do anything because of all the obstruction. And there is truth to that. But as I've said, there are other things that he could have done through this time, but he didn't do. He could have gone in, he could have done stuff with the wall. I said that before. He could have worked with the guy in the state of Texas who apparently they're working hand in glove with around the coronavirus. And you could have done an eminent domain thing through the state of Texas, which is one of the biggest areas, and they could have just done that. And then, what's his name? Greg Abbott, who now just wants to get reelected. If there's even going to be an election by the time that rolls around from him 2 years from now, that may not even happen. He may be a whole new government at that point, in which case Abbott might have a new seat at the table. Right? So these are big questions. These are the paradoxes that we face right now. Would it be worthwhile to just go in and surgically remove anybody that could have any kind of funding moving forward? And if you did that, would you risk your presidency? Well, I think the answer to that would be yes, because the other side would have absolutely no money to deal with. I mean, maybe they would have money because they just print it up in a printing press or whatever. But it wouldn't be as easy. And the networks that had been established would take time to reestablish those networks again. It would be the equivalent of like an atomic bomb. That's the paradox, isn't it? Well, most people want to trust the plan, whatever the plan is. So here we are. We're in a new phase now because this Rittenhouse thing has opened up a can of worms in a big way, in a very big way. And you're going to have people on the so-called right who will do everything in their power to distance themselves because they don't want to be seen as being provocateurs, because the left and the Democrats are just they're just drooling right now. They're drooling around this. But I'll tell you what he did do is he now then forced the government, and he forced the state of Wisconsin, and he forced Kenosha to have even more National Guard. And guess what happened? The night after that event, there was nobody there. They cleared out. So again, paradoxically, a 17-year-old kid, whose intentions might have been, in his mind, noble. We don't know. They thought he was doing the right thing. They may have been confused, misguided. Right? I'm not in his head. But what I do know is that after that happened, guess what? They stopped rioting. Now, did it also coincide with, a larger number of National Guard being sent in? Sure. But why weren't they there to begin with? Why did it take a 17-year-old kid, and what happened to those 3 upstanding citizens? Why did it have to come to that? That's the big question. And that's a question that I think most so-called Americans should be asking. Look what's happening in Melbourne. Right? They can't even do anything in Melbourne now. They can't. Their hands are tied. Although somebody did send me a protest that happened in Melbourne. It was a good thing to see. It was dudes wearing masks. But they were out and about. They were numbers, one step at a time, right? One step at a time. So I'm going to play you another part of the paradox here. So this happened right after the Jacob Blake incident. This is Minneapolis. Heaven help you people in Minneapolis. Now, I want to set the stage here. All right. It is 3:27 p.m. Okay? 3:27 p.m. Now, what is wrong with this picture? What's wrong with this picture? Well, what's wrong with this picture is that these people are on the streets. Apparently, they don't have jobs, or if they have jobs, maybe they have them at night or early in the morning, right? Or they're not going to school because, well, the schools have been shut down, or maybe they've lost their jobs. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's say they're employable, or they had jobs. All right. Let's say that they had jobs and they were contributing members of so-called society. Well, they might have lost their jobs. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that they are a byproduct of the system, which took something away from them. Okay. Or a byproduct of the system that has basically shut down their colleges, or colleges in general. So now what are they doing? Now they're forced to kind of congregate on the street and get whatever kind of assistance, legal or otherwise. If this group of people were not there on the streets, that perhaps this incident doesn't occur. Now we get into the systemic issues, which we have been dealing with since Johnson and the Great Society and the creation of the welfare state. This debate has not gone away, and in fact, it's only gotten worse. So what happens? I'll show you what happens. So they see the cops. Now this guy supposedly shoots himself. Here come the cops. They're after him. Apparently they were chasing him. Okay. Again, I have no context. And watch. Now they see the cops. They see the cops coming, and they start to run. They're out of there. See you later. We're gone. I'm leaving. Except this person on the ground is not really getting the memo. They're not getting the memo. And then this guy apparently, swallows a piece of lead, a high velocity piece of lead. Now, people say that they saw the gun reflected in the background. Now look what happens.
Run that shit! Hey, you stay by the door.
Looks like a target.
One sec. Don't do it.
Okay, there you go. I don't know if you heard the cheer, but the cheer was burn this shit, right? Burn this shit, and that's the result of theoretically what happened. I'm not even sure what happened. Like, I'm not even sure if the guy actually shot himself or not. I don't know. Usually, if somebody puts a gun in their mouth and shoots himself, you know what happens as a result of that? There's a lot of blood. And then you would see not just the blood, but you would see the head sort of, disassembled or decapitated from the body. I didn't see that. I didn't see that happen. But what we did see is we saw the police running to chase the guy down. And then there's another video where there's a woman screaming that the police shot him. So here we are. We're in Geminiville again, right? How do you resolve the paradox? This is really what the show is about today, is how to resolve the paradox. This is not an easy kind of metaphysical equation to solve. So the best thing you can do is find truth within you. That's number one. You got to find the truth within you, and there is a right and there is a wrong, and you have to be able to embrace that at some level, right? You have to be able to embrace there is a right and there is a wrong on some level. And then what do you do with that? What do you do with that knowledge? What do you do with that information? Do you then go out and try to right that wrong in a very, very demonstrative and direct fashion? Or if you don't want to be just an NPC, What do you do at that point? And I've talked about some of the things you can do. I gave you an idea at the beginning of the broadcast that got cut out there for a while. There are things you can do. There are things that you can do to resolve the paradox, but you have to be able to think outside of the paradox. You have to, in astrology, the paradox is the opposition, right? And we're dealing with the opposing points of the nodes. So we have Sagittarius over here, and then we have Gemini over here, right? So theoretically, what we want to do is we want to find the midpoint. And guess what the midpoint is with Gemini, Sagittarius? It's Pisces. That's the midpoint. Isn't that interesting? So you resolve the paradox, believe it or not, through the Piscean application. Interesting, isn't it? Interesting. But what do we know about Pisces? We know that Pisces represents a certain ideology, a certain belief system. But maybe we have to reimagine what Pisces is. Maybe we have to reimagine what Pisces is capable of. And that's a discussion for another time and another day. And maybe we'll do that on Sunday night. Okay, so I'm out of here for today. Now, here I got great news for you. I got great news. Tomorrow is the Friday Forecast. And I'm going to have Mickey Willis on my Forecast tomorrow. It's going to be earlier tomorrow. It's going to be at 10 a.m. because he's in Washington, D.C. And he has actually been meeting with, guess what? The White House. All right. Mickey Willis has been meeting with the White House. That's got to be good news. He is the producer and the director of Plandemic, both 1 and 2. So you don't want to miss this. Okay. It's going to be really great interview. I like this guy a lot. I talked to him yesterday. He's a great guy. And I now have an email out, an email/message out to Del Bigtree. And I'm trying to get him on in hour number 2. Now, having Mickey on in hour number 1 might be helpful. And I could even do a pre-record. We'll figure this thing out. I'm going to try to get Del Bigtree on. So we have Mickey Willis in hour number 1 and Del Bigtree in hour number 2. At the very least, we'll have Mickey Willis on for an hour. And I'm looking forward to that. Okay? All right. So let's just go over today. What are we dealing with now? We're dealing with the paradox. And you have to find a way to solve the paradox inside yourself. And then once you solve the paradox inside yourself, which can be very hard, can be very difficult, and very contradictory on a number of levels. But once you solve the paradox inside yourself, then guess what? You can operate from a higher level, in a higher order. Okay? All right, let me check in with you guys. Let's see. Crowdsourcing Solutions, meeting with the White House. Yep. Well, we'll see. We'll see. I think Del Bigtree's been to Washington as well. Look, if that's what's going on, and if they're able to get that kind of access, why not? We'll talk with them. And if you guys have questions, I'll have, let's see. So here's the deal. If you have questions tomorrow for Mickey, you put them up in chat. Okay. Put them up in chat. Now, and I'll ask those questions. I have no problem asking tough questions if you have tough questions for him. All right. I also hope that we can focus on what he's talking about. And because when I have a guest on and they're actually able to watch, they're actually able to see what people are talking about, because their experience is what my experience is. So, they're able to look at what's going on in Chatlandia, and I love you guys. Don't get me, please. This is not a criticism, because you're all very independent. And I know you guys love to connect and shoot the shit and go off topic. I go off topic a lot. Okay. But, let's try to stay on topic tomorrow with Mickey for the majority of the show. That would be great. That'd be totally great. Because he sees what I see with chat. Just remember that. Okay. Just remember that. So if you're discussing the content, fantastic. Right? fantastic. And if you have questions, I will ask them. Okay. And cross your fingers around Dell Bigtree. Let's see if we get that going for tomorrow. News on the workshop. I just need another week on the webinar. I apologize. I'm up to my eyeballs, right? I'm up to my eyeballs and stuff. I'm working 24/7 to try to administrate as many of these things as possible. And I'm one guy, okay? One guy. So when what did I do yesterday? I went out and, basically organized a flash mob, spent the majority of my night last night trying to get back and listen to people's emails, and then get up in the morning, collate material so that you guys are informed and you can kind of make decisions based on another kind of level. So I apologize. It's going to be next week. I know it's Labor Day, but that's my first window for this thing. And I'll be putting that up on my website, hopefully today. Okay. Just give me another week and it'll happen. It's just been, every day now, it's just like, it's a circus every day. All right. I'm out of here. Use your head in order to discern what's real. Your heart to say what's possible. Join me tomorrow at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, where I'll have Mickey Willis, who is the producer and director of Plandemic 1 and 2, and hopefully Mr. Dell Bigtree in hour number 2. We'll see. I make no promises on that end, but it certainly would be great. All right. Take good care. Bye for now. Yes, I know Dell is in Texas. Guess what? Dell was in Fredericksburg 2 weeks ago. He was in Fredericksburg 2 weeks ago. And he had dinner with one of my close friends here in Fred for 6 hours. And that's kind of be my my window to try to get to Dell Bigtree. All right. God bless y'all. Take good care. Bye for now.